This is the story of the highly decorated Obersturmführer Friedrich Hahl. His comrades also called him the Little King. He tells of a life that was shaped by discipline in the military from a very young age. He tells of his training with the Waffen SS, the cruel war in Russia, and his escape from captivity. Listen to the unvarnished truth of a German soldier of the Waffen SS.
My parents had trouble and hardship to provide for the daily bread. My mother went to clean and my father did small jobs at that time. There were over 6 million unemployed in January and February 1932. We have almost reached that number again today. There was hardship throughout the country. I had a good friend at school, and we both decided to join the NSDAP. It was clear to us that they were simply the best. And my friend Karl Baumgartner, unfortunately he also died. He was lucky that his father was a so-called old fighter. These were the party members who had been in the party before 1933, and they were given the Golden Party badge. His two sisters were big Bund Deutsche Mädel leaders, and of course my friend Karl Baumgartner was already a pimp, a member of the German Jungvolk. He was 10 years old at the time in 1932. At that time I would have liked to become a member of the German Jungvolk too, but my parents wouldn't let me. My father was apolitical. He didn't want to know anything about politics. My brother Hans worked for Daimler-Benz, but in 1932 he was also unemployed and was one of the 6 million unemployed. My sister wasn't interested in politics, and neither was my second brother. But I was interested. Yes, I was very interested in all that. Time passed, and one day we were standing in the school gym listening to a loudspeaker. It was January 30th, 1933. Adolf Hitler was the Chancellor of the Reich. I was thrilled. It was great. My mother was less happy about it, but because I was so enthusiastic, she was happy too. Now came the time of recovery in Germany, and the great marches. Everyone marched. On May 1st, we marched. On Hitler's birthday, we marched. On November 9th, we marched. Everyone marched, with flags and in step. Everything was great, and the economy was on the up again. By the end of 1934, the number of unemployed had fallen below the 1 million mark for the first time. Yes, now a great life began for me as a young person and member of the German Jungvolk. Excursions, marches, we fought and warred against each other in games. At Easter, we went to an Easter camp. At Whitsun, we went to a Whitsun camp. In summer, we went to a tent camp. We were all just happy, and everything was safe. It was great. It was also the case at school. In 1935, there was the so-called State Youth Day. That was on a Saturday when there was no school, so we could go into the forest and play at being wild warriors and do anything else that pleased the boys, even steal the flag from another group. And then we fought over the flag again. Once, in 1936, or was it 1938, a big battle meeting was held over 4 days. All 5 units were taken somewhere by bus and then fought against each other on large fields. Everyone had a ribbon tied around their arm, and if it was torn off, you were dead. Yes, it was all very great. When I turned 10, I naturally wanted to become a leader of the Jungvolk, and then in 1934, I was called up for a leadership course in Alt-Hengstenberg, and when I passed this course, I was allowed to wear a beautiful white and red ribbon, and of course I was very proud. Those were very carefree years. When I turned 14, I joined the Hitler Youth, and the girls joined the Bund Deutsche Mädels. That was the rule. At the age of 18, the boys joined the SA. The economy was also improving, so everything was good. The people were freed from want and hunger. Finally, there was work for everyone. Hitler built the first motorways. They hadn't existed before. The first motorway ran from Nuremberg to Stuttgart. That's why there was work. The construction companies had orders. The companies had orders. and I myself was released from primary school and started an apprenticeship in a machine factory. Then came September 1st, 1939. War. We were thrilled. There's a war. Holy Fatherland, when in danger your sons will rally around you. Surrounded by danger, we stand hand in hand for the fatherland. Yes, that was how it was back then. I had just turned 16 on September 1st, 1939, and it was perfectly clear to me that I was going to be a soldier. I have to say that my brother Hans applied to join a special police unit in 1930. These policemen were deployed when the various parties were fighting on the streets with more or less stabbing weapons, and there were dead and injured, and in this case the police went out in hundreds and fought these conflicts. My brother was a very well-known wrestler who fought in the middleweight category. I, the little boy, always stood next to him when my brother was competing, and my big brother was my huge role model. Of the 300 applicants, only 10 were accepted, and my brother was one of them. He was much bigger and stronger than me. As a proven athlete, he was appointed to the personal protection of the commander of the unit at that time, a great honor. My leader, David Pulse, had volunteered. He was killed within the first few days of the campaign in France. One day, on February 14th, my group received the order. We had to report to a school in Stuttgart on Tuesday for an important appointment. The order came from the band leader. Such orders were very important, so I marched there with my followers. We gathered in a large hall. Then we were told that we would soon be hearing a speech. We didn't know who would be giving the speech, and we were curious. Then the door opened and 3 proud SS leaders came in. At that time it was still called the Waffen SS, not the SS Verfügungstruppe. They were spread out, so there weren't very many locations. One was in Munich, one in Düsseldorf, where the famous company Germania was stationed, for example. They looked at us strapping men for a moment. Then one of the leaders gave a fiery speech. Men like you have to become soldiers, but you don't have to join the Wehrmacht. You should join the SS Verfügungstruppe. Then one of the men asked, "Who volunteers?" We all took a step forward. We were immediately examined. We had to undress and our height was measured. A blue pencil was used to write our height on our chest. I still remember I was only 1.68 meters tall, so I was much too small for the SS Verfügungstruppe. The absolute minimum height at that time was 1.74 meters, so I stood in front of the medical officer of our unit, and he told me I was not tall enough. I assured him that I would grow a lot in the next 4 weeks, and that I would definitely have reached the right height by the time I was included. I never reached it. But the medical officer recognized that I really wanted it, and he said that the SS Verfügungstruppe needed exactly such people, so I was accepted. But there was another problem. Since I was still a minor, I had to get my father's consent, but my father did what I wanted. He said, "You have to know what you're doing, and if you really want to do it, then you should do it." I already had a military ID card. With that, you were allowed to go to places at the age of 17 that you would otherwise only be allowed to go to at the age of 18. That was important in Stuttgart. There was all sorts of things to see and experience. Then, at the end of July, I received my call-up papers. I had to report for duty in Munich on August 5th, 1940. So I got on the train, and my mother, the good one, had to say goodbye to her youngest son on the platform. But she had to do that a few more times over the course of time and say goodbye to her son somewhere in a foreign country. But this was the first time that I had left the nest at home. There were 4 men on the train who looked exactly like me, with short hair and so on. We knew immediately that we belonged together. In fact, I am still in contact with one of the young men today, and he also survived the war. Once we arrived, we ate a huge schnitzel at the station and had a good meal. Yes, and suddenly the time was up. The barracks are about 10 kilometers outside of Munich, so we had to take a taxi to make it there by 2 p.m. Then we took a taxi directly to the gate. The guard was standing there as usual at the gate, and then the guard said, "They must have a lot of money to come here in a taxi. But I'll come back later to our pay, which we got at the time." Then we reported to the dining room, and I was assigned to the 4th company because at that time The companies were organized according to height, with the tallest in the first company and the shortest in the last company. When the companies marched, it was a beautiful line, and I was one of the shortest. After the allocation, the company sergeant came into the room and asked, "Who is hungry?" No one answered. Immediately, everyone had to put their suitcases away and do 10 squats. For the second time, he asked, "Who is hungry?" I saw through it and stepped forward. The others had to do up to 5 times 10 squats until they realized that a soldier is always hungry. But now I've forgotten something. In November 1940, I was ordered to a barracks training course. That means that all 16 to 18-year-old Hitler Youth and their leaders were called up for a barracks training course in a barracks near Stuttgart. As a result, we had 3 weeks of basic military training. We had already learned everything there, marching with the 98K rifle and so on. But we already knew how to march. We had learned that in the Hitler Youth, and we also had to be able to do field service. In any case, we had received pre-military training. On the first day, things were turbulent in the barracks. We were issued uniforms, and we got the Karabiner 98. My company commander was Hauptsturmführer Holinia Franzl. We called him Zigeunerbauer, a hard bastard. He was an Austrian from Vienna. He had a deep voice and 2 scars on his face. He was an imposing man, and he was standing there again when we were given our rifles, and I demonstrated my carbine with an exact military grip, and he looked a bit impressed. Yes, and then came the training. 5 a.m. wake-up call. At 6 a.m. we marched out into the barracks yard. 5 hours of exercising, practicing grips with the rifle and so on. Then we had to march in formation, clean the barracks in the afternoon, clean our clothes, and in the evening we had lessons. I should also mention that when we moved into the barracks, we were surprised to see that there were men in our company who didn't speak German. They were Dutch. Dutch, we wondered. What should we do with Dutchmen? We Germans and Dutchmen? Yes, it was the first unit of European volunteers in our regiment, called Westland. This regiment was set up with mixed ethnicities, so in my group there were 6 Germans and 6 Dutchmen. But they were all volunteers, and within 8 days we were the best comrades. They came mainly from the Dutch sister party of the NSDAP, and about 600 people signed up, but only because they thought they would be used at a desk. When they heard that they were to become soldiers, many of them left again. The people of Munich were very well disposed towards us. We collected money for the Winter Relief Organization near the Metzler rubber factory and were very successful. The year 1940 was drawing to a close. It was a very cold winter, and we often did outdoor sports in light gym clothes at -10 degrees Celsius, but as I said, it was a hard time. It was the end of the year, and 1941 was upon us. There was a Christmas holiday, but some of us had to stay in the barracks. And yes, as a non-commissioned officer, I volunteered to stay in the barracks. The others had a nice Christmas holiday with their families. For some it was the last of their lives, but nobody thought about that at the time. Then our comrades returned and we had intensive field exercises, digging trenches, taking up positions with machine guns, marching and so on. It was tough training, based on the principle that sweat saves blood. Then came spring 1941. And as planned, we were loaded onto a train at Munich's Ostbahnhof station to complete our combat training at the group training area and practice live fire. We knew that we were going to war, but we didn't yet know that there would be a war with Russia. There were wild rumors, but nobody expected a surprise attack on the huge Russian Empire. Some suspected that the Ukraine would let us march through and that we could then conquer the British outposts along the way.
Die Ukraine lässt uns durchmarschieren und wir packen den Engländer von da unten. Das war so gingen die Gerüchte bei uns herum. Nicht?